Hey Angel, welcome to Your Own University TV, where we're going to talk about what sets you apart from everybody else in the world because you matter. On today's episode, we're going to talk about therapy because therapy is something that many of us have experienced. Maybe if you had adverse childhood experiences, maybe you've been an addict of some sort. Maybe you've suffered from depression, anxiety, some mental illness, a divorce, a crippling relationship of some sort, and you've been in therapy and you get through that therapy, and then what? Today we're going to talk about the then what, because it's not talked about enough. So over and over again, I get letters, I get things, people asking me, what makes you do what you do? Why are you a transpersonal coach? What is transpersonal coaching? And why aren't you a therapist if you are, if your master's is in psychology, right? So I want to answer all of those questions for you today and give you this big why that hopefully is going to open you up. If you have been in therapy, if you've thought about therapy, I'm going to share with you what's really great about therapy and why I am not a quote-unquote therapist, and why you should come and talk to me if you have already gone through the therapeutic model and you're ready for the next step. So, what is transpersonal psychology? Transpersonal psychology means that we are more than meets the eye. Basically, it means that not only are you your physical, mental, and emotional experiences and all your belief systems and your health and your wellness and all of that stuff, but you also have this psycho-spiritual component to you. You might have experienced some really weird, whacked out things. Maybe you've had an out-of-body experience. Maybe a trauma has made you forget, and then over time you have PTSD or post-traumatic syndromes, which are like phantom symptoms of the past, stuff that happens that come up for you to heal in that moment. And all of these things are really real, but they're not acknowledged that much in a classic therapeutic model. Maybe you have had some psychedelic experiences that have opened up your eyes to different dimensions, different realities. Maybe you have had just some spiritual awakenings that have allowed you to see things really beyond the veil of our reality. That might sound weird, however, it's not really that weird. It's actually part of our human experience. And that is what I love about transpersonal psychology. So years ago, I entered into the therapy methodology. I was 13 when I turned my dad in for molesting me and hitting me, and I needed some help, right? I needed to talk it out. We needed to hash it out. My father needed help himself. And certainly stepdad, but he needed help himself. And we had this opportunity to grow. My mother needed help shifting her paradigms of codependence and awareness and stepping into her own power. So we needed that therapeutic model to talk it out, hash it out, sort things out in our head. And also label, bring names to experiences that we were having, like depression and anxiety and PTSD. And expressing those things physically began to happen as well. So back pain, headaches, anxiety, for me, cancer, and autoimmune diseases. Very common for anybody that has gone through adverse childhood experiences. Maybe you've heard of ACEs. Really big in awareness in like, what did you experience in your childhood? What did you experience growing up where it formed your mentality? And how do you work through that? So knowing your childhood is extremely important, and therapy is very, very, very key in helping you to hash out what happened and label what happened. Now, there's other therapeutic models that build on that, the behavioral model and working through how do you shift your behaviors, what are your belief systems, and I use all of that in my counseling with people privately, and I train people how to use that in the coaching methodology at your own university. So if you want to be a coach, it's really important for you to know, how do you ask those open-ended questions? How do you lean into what happens next so you can truly allow your clients or yourself to expand into a new world? However, when I was going through this methodology, I was 13 to about 33. And I had gone back to counseling a couple times in my 20s with my then husband, and every time we went, I would tell them about my childhood, right? Tell them like, oh, I've done this before, and they would latch on to me like a hot potato. They're like, oh my gosh, yes, we're gonna help you. And I'm like, yeah, I'm sure I needed help, but I think the relationship needed help. I think this is like a little bit more prudent here. But they would latch on to me. So eventually I realized, as I went through the system again and again and again with different people asking for help, not even related to my own childhood experiences, because I had already hashed them out and I already dealt with them, that there was a big gap in the system. And that's when my education became something that was extremely important to me, because there needed to be a place in the system where it was no longer healing, fixing, and overcoming the past, but it was like, okay, the past is the past. It's gonna be there. Now what? How do I thrive in the present moment? How do I live holistically now? How do I live as a healthy person? How does a person that's not in victim mentality, that's not in survival mentality, how do they actually think? How do they behave? What are the patterns that they do? And how can I learn those patterns without reading a fucking 1,000 books? And even when I read 1,000 books and I went to school for all of this, I realized that there was another gap in the system, and that's where the Amazing You program went in, because not everything was addressed. I would have to go to one counselor for nutrition, one counselor for my physical training and what worked best for my body to get lean and tone and in perfect proportion, one counselor for my mentality and my behaviors, one counselor for my emotions and PTSD and anxiety and other things that were coming up, and hormone balance, and how did it all work together? And then I had spiritual mentors, right? And all this other stuff. And it was just like all this stuff. And I didn't have enough time for that many mentors in my life to figure out who I was. So I began to put together a program that would allow me to really figure out who I was, define myself for myself, and define myself for myself as a thriver, as somebody who was no longer focused on being sick, no longer focused on fixing, healing, focused on the past, no longer focused on the screw ups, but also lengthening into that. And what developed was the Amazing You program. What developed was the Your Own University coaching curriculum based on the 6 personal power zones in the Amazing You program. What developed is a holistic approach in transpersonal psychology to bring you the depth into the quarters to define yourself in the 6 major areas of your life that you actually have power. Right? Now, yes, there are some key elements in each of these areas that are in the past habits, that are in the past genetics, that might be prone to needing some shifts, but you define how you do that for you. You define how you want to believe. If I tell you how to do that or somebody else tells you how to do that, then there's a skewed view. And that's a method in therapy where they're educating and teaching, and there's less positive psychology in there. So positive psychology really looks at, well, what is going right in your life? So I adopted much of positive psychology and the transpersonal psychology together into the Amazing You program, into our coaching curriculum at Your Own University. So what we can do is help you define you in a really positive, forward-thinking way that allows you to incorporate all of the beautiful tools that you learned from the past and let go of any of the negative, blocking, demeaning, critical old ways, old patterns of the past, and really create for yourself your blueprint for positive, thriving living. Now, this is different because in a therapeutic model, you continue to rehash the same things over and over and over again. Even if you're going into hypnotherapy and you're shifting things, they're tiny micro shifts in one setting. And this was just taken too long for me, right? I was in therapy for friggin' years. I was already doing coaching. I was already doing nutrition. I'd been a yoga teacher for years. I was already into transpersonal psychology and hypnotherapy and EFT and CERT and everything else that I was into, emotional intelligence and reprogramming. And so it was like, why do I have to do all of these things? Why can't there be one thing that works at one time to help me figure out where I'm going, get me on that path, and allow me to step into my power so I can divinely choose yes for myself? And that's where Amazing You comes into place. That's where I have said, okay, you've been in therapy for a number of years. You have hashed out your stuff. Now, you can still do this. It becomes an addiction to fixing yourself. It becomes an addiction because you're so good at fixing the problem, looking at the problem, facing the shadows, walking through the pattern, blah, 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 that it feels like an accomplishment. It feels really positive for most of us. And so how do you recover from that? Is you learn how to utilize all of these tools in order to manifest the life that you really desire to live. So that is why I do what I do. I do what I do because there is a gap in the system, that there is a gap between childhood of adverse reality, of pain, of struggle, the years of therapy that it takes to heal, the physical, mental, emotional, and psycho-spiritual elements to that, and then putting the pieces of yourself back together. It shouldn't fucking take 30, 40, 50 years. So if you have been in this paradigm, if you've been stuck in one piece or the other, either not wanting to look at your childhood, and so you overwork, over medicate, over everything, and you're over that, looking at your childhood so much that self-help has become an addiction. You're spending all of your money and your time in it, and you don't know what to do with yourself outside of self-help. Or you have literally been sick for so long, suffering from PTSD, chronic fibromyalgia is normal. That just came to mind. Just chronic pains on this stuff, and you're like, what do I do now? How do I get out of this, what I call cycle of abuse? Then this is your next step. If you have ever wanted to help people break this pattern with a system that works like gold, then this is a next step for you too, to look into our certification and training program to become a transpersonal holistic health coach with your own university. If you want to come into the program and work with me privately, then you can look me up at lishaantica.com, and the program you're looking for is Amazing You. It is 12 sessions, and if you read the testimonials, we have testimonials up the yo-yo of people that have literally come into the program, shifted whatever needed to shift in each of the paradigms of their life, and stepped into their dreams, stepped into their health, stepped into a really better life, a life outside or beyond therapy, life beyond survival, a life beyond coping, and learning how to actually thrive the way that you desire to thrive for yourself. So I hope to see you at your own university or lishaantica.com, where you can set up a next step consultation with me absolutely free, and we will talk about your next steps and how you can begin to build on all of that hard work that you've already put in to create a life that you want, free from therapy. Wow, that was a mouthful. If this resonates with you, please give us a thumbs up. Share this with your friends. There's enough people walking around in the world trying to get better, when really we just need to figure out your personal blueprint and how you are designed to thrive. So if this resonates with you, give us a thumbs up. Like your own university, come visit me at lishaantica.com and create your next step program with me. Let's get started, because you matter. Talk to you soon.